but this angle.
Okay.
Yes, I think this is much nicer.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Say hello to my wife, Kathleen.
Yes. Very nice
Yeah.
to see her photo. I hope you have many children, at least 3 or 4.
At least 3 or 4. Did you hear that,
Yes.
Kathleen? At least 3 or 4.
That's what she wants to? Very good.
When she was young, she wanted to start an orphanage in China.
Oh, they have plenty of orphanages already. And I know quite a number of American couples going to adopt daughters from China because the communists limit the families, only allow 1 child. And the peasants, if they have only 1 girl, the girl is married to another village, and the 2 old people can't work anymore, no money. Who is going to look after them? So they all want to have sons. And there were many tragic stories about little girl babies being discarded. So the government now organized the orphanages and allow people from abroad to come and adopt Chinese girls. They're all girls. You go to the orphanages, there is not a single boy. It's sad. But those little girls came to America, they get spoiled. I got invited. They have an organization. This was in the late 80s, I think 89 or 90. I met one lady with a little Chinese girl in the waiting room of my allergy doctor. And she was spoiling that kid. And when she turned around and saw me, she said, "Oh, you're NIEN CHENG." I said, "Indeed, I am." She said, "Oh, I just finished your book. I went to get my daughter, and I thought I should read your book." I said, "Thank you for reading it." And she said, then the little girl was climbing all over her and hitting her face and so. I said, "Look, you're not bringing her up right." I said, "You know, kids need some rules and regulations. You should tell her, you're not to climb on my knee, on my lap, when I'm talking to somebody. You should tell her that." I think American mothers inclined to spoil their kids. They don't believe in discipline. But those kids are all nicely dressed. So she told other mothers, they have an organization that she met me. So they invited me to talk to them, to meet them all. There were over 200 families at that time in this area who have Chinese little girls. So I agreed. And they hired a hall in a church. And there were at least 60 mothers. Some fathers came too. And we had a very nice afternoon. And the little girls running around all dressed up in their party clothes. I said to myself, you know, these were peasant kids. If they didn't come to America, what kind of life would they have? Their parents may not even have the money to put them through school, let alone go to university. And all these women I met were well educated. Many of them have jobs and quite senior in offices, lawyers, and business women. And those girls going to have a wonderful life in America. But in China now, there is a shortage of young women. So there are gangs who abduct young girls. They go to the countryside and say to the young girls, "I can find you a job." And because the countryside is still very, very poor, so the girls fall into their trap and went with them, and actually they make them become prostitutes. And some girls run away and got home. Many, and then they sell them. they sell them to poor peasants who can't afford to get a wife because there is a shortage of girls. So the parents of girls require the future son-in-law to pay to buy this, buy that, and the poor peasants don't have the money.
Good. Let me do one thing. Let me just see everything's okay. So tell us a little bit about when you grew up in Shanghai, right?
No, I grew up in Beijing.
Oh, you grew up in Beijing?
Yes, I only started to live in Shanghai 1948 when my husband and I returned from Australia. After we were married in England, after we both finished our studies at London School of Economics. We were married 1938, and we traveled back to China. It was a very hard trip with lots of Chinese students from all over Europe. We had to take a French ship to go to Saigon, that's Ho Chi Minh City now. And we couldn't get immediately the tickets. We had to stop many days. Then we got another little ship to go to Haiphong, that's north, a seaport. From Haiphong, we disembarked, then again delayed several days. There were nearly 50 of us. Then we traveled by train to Hanoi, which was the capital city of Vietnam. And from Hanoi, we could get on that train all the way to Kunming. You know, this was built by the French through the mountains. And you look out of the window, it's a sheer drop into the, yes, I don't know what is in there. We saw monkeys and climbing around on the mountains. Some people say they're not monkeys. They're the local tribes people. They climb like mountains. They wear very little, no clothes, just some, you know.
Aborigines?
Yeah, they were very dark. Anyway, we got to Kunming. Oh, the place. Couldn't find a place to live. We begged, only one hotel run by a Frenchman. We begged him. There were about 5 or 6 girls. He said, I will let the girls sleep on the dining table after we serve dinner. The man said, we can sleep on the floor. We don't have enough things to put on the floor for you. Oh, they said, never mind. We just want a shelter. So some of the men came, and I was married, newly married to my husband, and he had to go somewhere else. He graduated from Tsinghua University in Beijing, and I went to NIEN CHENG University in Beijing, so we both spoke Mandarin. And then he decided Tsinghua during the war combined with 2 other Chinese universities and formed a university in Kunming. So he looked up his old professor, and they all knew him, of course. So he stayed with his professor. But his professor only had 1 room with his wife, and they had no, I went there to dinner. They had no furniture. They were using packing crates for tables and seats. They were living terribly poorly. And we stayed like that for, I think 10 days before we got 1 ticket on the plane. So I said to my husband, you go. You have to go and find a job and a place to live, because Chongqing was just as crowded as Kunming, all these refugees from the coastal areas. So we didn't get to and he flew to Chongqing, and almost immediately he went to Waijiaobu, that is a foreign service, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I hitched a ride on a truck that belonged to International Red Cross, because I ran into this woman who was my school friend in Kunming, and she was married to a Chinese from Singapore who worked for the International Red Cross. So I said, I'm stuck here. There is no plane ticket, and I'm thinking of going to Chongqing by bus. Oh, she said, no, that's very dangerous. You know, the buses, they always have too many passengers with their luggage. So many of them tip over and have terrible accidents. She said, I'll ask my husband if they can give you a ride. And they had 3 trucks which drove from Free China, that is Chongqing and Kunming and Chengdu, and on that same road to Chongqing. And you know, that's part of Burma Road, you know. Anyway, they were coming to Kunming to get supply of medicine to ship to Free China. And there was an American couple, because the truck only have 2 seats. One is the driver, 1 seat. And naturally, they have 1 truck. There were 2 Chinese, both men. They have 1 truck. There was a 3rd truck, only 1 Danish worker for International Red Cross, a young man, and empty seat. So I got it. And I traveled with them. It took, I think, a week before we could, because we had to stop at the villages. It's too dangerous to drive at night. Also, they buried gasoline underground at different villages. So on our way back, we can fill the tank and also do some other business. And there were 6 of us. The farmer, they have definite families that serve these Red Cross trucks. And when we got there, they will have ready already maybe a few eggs and some rice cooked already. And then they spread the hay on the ground. We will lie on those. No water to have wash your face. Couldn't take your clothes off. So literally, I lived like that for 1 week. And my face was coated with dust because you can't keep the windows closed, especially my truck, because the Danish young man was a chain smoker. And he would take his hand off the steering wheel and light his cigarette. And I said to him, look here, let me light your cigarette for you. Anyway, we got there, and it was an adventure. So I wrote an article for a British newspaper about that trip. It was fantastic. We got there, and my husband found, because he came from a Christian family. I didn't come from a Christian family, but my family, my mother was a Buddhist, but she did not try to influence the kids. You know, she was very, very quiet, old-fashioned Chinese lady, and it will stop by itself. And she was not very interested in any of the children, or we had many, many servants to raise the children, you know. My father went to Japan when he was very young, something like 18, to go to the naval school. And when I had a lecturing tour in Japan after my book came out, the Japanese took me to see the place. It's on an island.
Wow.
And they printed out my father's record, and he went with a group of Chinese students. You know, in 1895, China was defeated in a naval battle by Japan. That's when China lost Taiwan and Japan occupied Korea. And I was warmly received by I mentioned in my book, 1 sentence, that my father was educated in Japan. And the commandant received me, and he gave me a briefing. Then he sent me with one of his subordinates to look around the whole island. We drove, from building to building. And they showed me the dormitory my father lived in. Now it's a classroom, and so on. So when we finished, he invited me to lunch with him. So I came back and I said to him, he said, "Do you have any questions?" Oh, I said, "Only one question." I said, "How come the building my father came was a dorm? Now it's a classroom. How come the Americans didn't bomb it? Because this is a naval college, and right close by was Hiroshima." I said, "Why didn't they bomb it or do something about it?" Oh, he said, "No, they didn't bomb us. However, they did some damage." Oh, I said, "I suppose that's natural because they occupied Japan." "Oh, no. They chopped down all the cherry blossom trees because the trees were full of worms." He spoke fluent English. So I said, "I congratulate you on your command of the English language." Oh, he said, "I spent several years at Annapolis." So my father was in Japan many years, and I learned about his life there. And it was very interesting. And so he had no religion, but we had ancestor worship. For Chinese New Year Eve, that's yesterday evening, we all had to kneel down and knock our head with a photo of my grandparents. And they have tall red candles. So I met my husband in London, and my mother-in-law, this was before Japan attacked China. I was there 35 to 38. Japan attacked China 37. So I got to know my husband almost right away because I was the only Chinese student, woman student, when I was there, the first year. Second year, a friend of mine came to join me. And there were a number of Chinese men students. We Chinese, when we eat a meal, we like to have soup more than the Westerners. And the London School of Economics dining room has a part, 1/3 of it. You can sit down. It's only when you sit down and pay more that you can have soup. The other section, buffet. So the Chinese student who can afford it always go to that section. And I met them all. And there were a number of men students. My husband was among them. So I was very lonely, all by myself, 20 years old, British climate. I went there end of September. The term started in October, 1st of October. 3 terms in England, the college. And the day gets shorter, it gets dark outside. 2:30 in the afternoon, in the library, you have to put the lights on. Oh, I was miserable. I was homesick, and I made friends with some English girls, but not many. So I always said to my husband, if I weren't so lonely, maybe I wouldn't have got to know you so well. So he always came. He was working for a PhD. The PhD student had upstairs in the library we were not allowed to go to, but they can come down to get the books and mix with the undergraduate.
Where was this?
So when we finished, we got married in England.
Where was the school again? Where was the school that you met?
London School of Economics.
Where is that, in Shanghai?
It's in London.
Oh, London.
Yes.
So you were in
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow, okay. What year were you there?
35 to 38.
Okay.
Their university is 3 years. I had 2 years university in NIEN CHENG, and my father wanted me to get out of Beijing because he knew the Japanese. He thought they were coming to attack China. Will be a war, but actually they didn't attack China until 37. And I went to England also because the Chinese ambassador was my father's friend, so he could keep an eye on me. I had a good time there, and I just wrote something for them. They wanted, you know, we have very well-known alumni. One is Paul Volcker, another is Mr. Thoreau. He's a multi-billionaire, so he donates a lot of money, and they have a foundation here. When I went to this school, it was free for the British student. Foreign student had to pay a fee. It's very international even then. I knew a girl from India, a girl from Romania, French. They all come to this. It's the best school for economics. And even now, their graduates in Washington, they have a alumni club, and I've been a few times there, but each time I was the oldest. And they asked me to speak. That's how I started going. Then they invite me for this and that. I turned up a couple of times, then I stopped. I said, I'm too busy. Now I say I'm too old. And but the foundation in New York communicate with me because in my will I have left them quite a bit of money for both my husband and myself. You know, London School of Economics, looking back, I was, you know, before I went there, can you imagine a Chinese woman, 20 years old? We weren't educated because our parents expect us to be independent and have a job. No, not at all. To have a good husband. My generation of Chinese women didn't work. If I went to work, my husband lose face, you know. So he was, we went to Chongqing, then he was appointed to Australia. And we were in Australia 7 years. And Mei Ping, my daughter, was born there. Why we were staying so long, because normally 3 or 4 years, you know, was because my husband, this is a complicated story, but it's interesting. You know, America used to have a Chinese exclusion law. That is, a Chinese in America could live here, could be a resident, but she or he cannot be a citizen unless they were born here. But because China was an allied, part of the Allied comrade during the Second World War, so they abolished that Chinese Exclusion Act and grant Chinese immigrants citizenship. Because America did it, Canada also did it, followed. Australia had a white Australian policy. They treated the Chinese who lived there, business people, restaurant owners and so on, even worse than Canada and the United States. But they wanted, or the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, my husband was number 2 in the embassy, and they assigned him to negotiate with Australia. It was a very hard negotiation. We were in close contact with the Minister of Immigration. He loved Chinese food. We had a Chinese cook from Hong Kong. Literally, he came to dinner every week. We tried to cultivate him, you know. And his son got sick, and we ordered medicine for him from America and all that. Finally, the agreement was signed, 48. My husband signed. All these Chinese business people overseas, they collected a huge amount of money they wanted to give to my husband. My husband said, no, you can write something to say thank you, a letter or something, but I cannot accept any money. So he didn't take anything. They said, my gosh, you're wrong, you're wrong. Everybody takes money. All the Chinese officials take money. You're the only one. My husband said, I can't help it. This is my principle. So we left and went back to Shanghai. Then he was appointed director of the Shanghai office of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we started to live in Shanghai. Actually, my mother and father by then had moved to Nanking, where my brother had a house, younger brother, and he actually went to England. Anyway, then his mother was in Jinan. When we arrived back in China, 1948, Jinan was already occupied by the communists. We did not go to Taiwan with the Kuomintang government because my husband wanted to get his mother to come and live with us. We had to wait until the communists took Shanghai, then we can travel by train to Jinan and bring my mother-in-law to come and live with us. When the communists first came, they were very nice to us because the man who took over my husband's office was a Tsinghua graduate. They didn't meet. This man was ahead of my husband. They didn't meet in school, but he also married a NIEN CHENG graduate. I knew this woman too. They were very nice too. They asked him if he could help them to get to know Shanghai, the foreign business people and all that. This group of people belonged to Zhou Enlai. Zhou Enlai had his own. You know, the Communist Party leadership, they are not unanimous. Zhou Enlai's group came from France. They were called the French group because they were all students in France, and they joined the French Communist Party. And then, as a group, they came back and joined the Chinese. And Mao Zedong was a guerrilla leader, so he had the military. He always controlled the military so that nobody can overthrow him. And this Zhang Hanfu was the name of the man who took over from my husband. He asked my husband to be their advisor for 1 year. And my husband said, all right, help them during the transition period. And then he went to teach at 2 universities. One was the Dongwu East, I don't know their English name, Dongwu University of Law. Another was St. John's University. But when Korean War broke out, St. John's University was swallowed up by some other university. And Dongwu University moved. So my husband was asked by Shell if he would become general manager in Shanghai because they felt with the communists here, it's better to have a Chinese manager. So my husband asked the communists.
Good. Okay, that looks good. Okay. All right. Now you were saying, what were you saying about, China and women?
I think the communists did 2 good things
Okay.
in China. One is the Chinese women nowadays. I grew up always I felt myself inferior to men because I always asked my husband opinion and so on, and put him first, and order food. You know, I had to cook every morning. He will come and tell me what he got in the market, because living under the communists, you can't say, I want to eat this, I want to eat that. He goes to the market, tried his best to get whatever he could. And since we had big pay, you know, my husband was manager for Shell, so the price was no problem. But the availability is a problem. There simply wasn't anything you can buy. So he will come back and said, I managed to get this and that. Then I always order the food, what he should cook and how he should cook it, according to what my husband liked. I never thought of ordering food because I like it.
You better not tell this to my wife here. Just kidding.
Yeah, this is my Chinese women of my. But nowadays, the Chinese women, they feel totally equal with men. And this is what the communists did. It gave them the opportunity to get out and get educated, you know, and have jobs. Not in the rural area. I'm talking about the middle class, people who can afford to go. And they made university education free, even provided food at the beginning. So, although the food was very plain and so on, you could, if you passed the exam, you could go to university. Your family didn't have to pay anything. But it didn't last very long because the government can't afford it. So, but entering high school and university, there was preferential treatment, like in the United States, but for people who are poor. My daughter had to pass average 80% on all subjects, average, from junior high to senior high. But if she were a girl from a working class family, she can pass with 60. So I used to say, this is unfair, this is unfair. My daughter said, oh, no. Now, it's fair, because the teacher explained to us that the working class kids, when they get home, they have to do housework. They have to look after the little ones. And we don't need to. We can do our homework, and if we don't know, our parents can help us even. So we should, and she said, in any case, we can all pass 80 quite easily.
And let me ask you, why did you and your husband go back to China in 1948? You know.
Oh, well, we had to. You mean 48?
Well, you went back to China from Australia, right?
Yes.
Why
yes.
did
But
you go
he
back?
was a part of the Kuomintang government.
Right.
He was transferred to this job.
I see.
You see, we didn't expect the Kuomintang to collapse like that, you know.
And when the communists did...
Actually, he was in the time we were in China, it's less than a year the communists came. He got rather disillusioned. So he started teaching even before the Kuomintang went away. He said, I didn't come from an influential family. In Kuomintang's system, I will get nowhere. This is as much, as high as I would ever get. And I don't enjoy dealing with those officials, because in my heart of hearts, I despise them. they all are corrupt. I mustn't show it, and I want to leave the government, he said. I will go to teach as a professor. He didn't expect the communists will take over all the colleges and schools. And there was really, once we made the decision to stay, to get my mother-in-law to come and live with us, and he will have a quiet life, teaching university, we made the wrong decision. We didn't count on the communists controlling the universities. He wasn't a member of the Kuomintang party because he joined during the war. And this was, during the war, it was supposed to be a united front. Kuomintang employed people who were not party members to give the American an impression that they are democratic. So they never asked him to join the party.
So that was good.
That was good, yeah. To a certain extent. But also, I think if the Zhou Enlai people could have controlled the government, there wouldn't have been a cultural revolution. It was, Mao felt threatened. Well, I explained it in my book. Mao, you read Dr. Li's book. As he got older and older, he never went to the office. He stayed at home, and from morning to night, he wore pajamas, just relax. And if he wanted to speak to any of the senior officials, he'd let them come. So it was one-to-one conversation. He never had attended a discussion group. And he had all kinds of ideas that he wanted Chinese people to. Of course, the Chinese people's character, the tradition, contributed or worsened Mao's behavior, because the Chinese believe in what the Chinese call 报喜不报忧. You report happy things. Never report to your senior officer failures. 报喜不报忧. So Mao couldn't go down to the village to see what his policy is doing. He depended on people to report to them. They all told him big lies. They said everything's working fine and so on. So that aggravated the situation. Mm-hmm. Actually, Mao failed in the Great Leap Forward. You compare the Chinese official population figure, mm-hmm. you will discover 20 million people disappeared during that time. They died, and most of them were peasants, because you are the production chief. The peasants under you in the commune, all the peasants under you have to produce so much. Now you don't dare to report that the area under your control was not meeting the quota. So instead of saying we fill the quota, you exaggerate, you add something. Because what you reported was much higher than the actual production, you have to make the peasants hand over much more of what they produce. And they are left with hardly anything. So, do you think they will work? Naturally, they don't work. And in any case, for agriculture, you can't run it this way, the bureaucratic way. The official is sitting in a room. He decides what crop to plant. And the team, head of the team, blow a whistle, all the peasants come out, and they start working. Blow a whistle, all go back. That's no way to do agriculture. you have to watch the weather, and if it suddenly rains in the middle of the night, you have to get up and go and do something. Nobody did anything. So also the production figure naturally declined because of the commune. And Mao had this crazy idea that to have more production, you should plant the rice and the wheat very close. And you have to dig deep, turn the earth over. The Chinese, for generations, they fertilize. So the topsoil, when you dig very deep, turn the topsoil with all the nutrients were buried underneath. So instead of improving production, it declined. And also you plant everything so close, they don't grow. The air can't go through. And also Mao advocate natural insecticides, because to buy the chemical insecticides costs a lot of money. So he has all kinds of ideas that you should cultivate certain kind of bugs. Those bugs will eat the bad bugs. But the bugs don't listen to him, so it didn't work. And then he had this brainwave that somebody dissected a sparrow, and they found rice in the sparrow's stomach. So they multiply. One sparrow eat so much rice, and China had billions of sparrows. That much rice is lost. So we had a campaign to kill the sparrows. My daughter was a little girl at that time. This was before 1958. She had to hand over 2 sparrows dead when she went to school. All the time in Shanghai, every family must kill the sparrows. And you climb on the roof and wave a red flag to frighten the sparrows, make them fly, fly, fly until they drop dead. Instead, what we did, and our neighbors were putting rice in a little plate under the hedges. And the sparrows all come and feed themselves on what we gave them. So they didn't fly around over our houses, and we got away with it. But what are we going to do? My daughter had to hand over 2 sparrows tomorrow. We didn't kill any sparrows. What are we going to do? My cook said, don't worry. Tomorrow morning, I will get up very early. I will go to the countryside that he rode on his bicycle to the edge of Shanghai, quite a long way, an hour's riding. And he came back with 2 dead sparrows. I said, how did you get this? He said, peasants. Chinese are born businessmen. Some peasants heard that the schools require every student to bring 2 sparrows, dead sparrows. They killed all the sparrows and sold them. Sold 2 sparrows to my cook. Wasn't that funny? That's how we lived under Mao,
Let me ask you, in your book, you talked a little bit about your house as an oasis of peace, it was very tranquility.
Yes,
tell us a little bit about your home in
well,
Shanghai.
I had to use, because my father studied in Japan and knew the Japanese military people, naval people especially, they used to come to our house for dinner and so on before they attacked China. So as soon as they attacked China, my father went to Shanghai and bought a small house and lived there. This was in the French settlement, so the Japanese couldn't come. This was before 41. While Wang Jingwei was organizing a quisling government, my father was afraid that his former Japanese friend will ask him to join this government. So he hid there But then the government was formed. It was Admiral Lin who didn't hide. He became the Minister of the Navy after, for Wang Jingwei's government, the Kuilei, Chinese call, puppet government. But in the West, it's called the Quisling government. And this man was shot, death penalty, shot by the Kuomintang. His daughters are here, and I see them quite often. Because they were all good friends. They went to Japan together. But my father escaped because by the time he emerged, they were not looking for anybody anymore. So he had this little house. And when my husband was alive, we lived in a house that belonged to Shell. He was general manager. It's very big. We had even a tennis court in our garden. And we had 2 doormen who took turns. And there is a driveway into the garden and the front door away from the street. But after he died, the new British manager came, and I had to move out. So I moved into that little house my father had, and he made for me. He gave it to me at that time. And they were living in Nanking. And so this small house had 3 rooms on each floor. 2 rooms, not as long as this, but about 2/3. 2 rooms, about like that. One is the ground floor. One is a dining room, one is a living room. And the smaller one, there is a smaller room about from here to here, was my daughter's study. And upstairs, and then of course there is kitchen, pantry, and you walk out the door, you can go to the garden. The garden was quite small. And we had the servants' 2 bedrooms over there, the other side of the kitchen. And the first floor was my bedroom, my study, and my daughter's bedroom. My daughter's bedroom had a balcony, which my maid used to hang the laundry. And she had her bathroom, I had my bathroom. And the 3rd floor, the same, 1 bathroom only. The maid occupied one of the bedrooms. And the 3rd room we used for storage because we had to hoard. Every time I went to Hong Kong, I was entitled, when I worked for Shell, to go to Hong Kong for holiday 1 month each year.
1 whole month?
1 month, 1 whole month, because I was in a communist country each year. I took it every 2 years for 2 months because applying to go is very hard. When my husband was alive, I accompanied him to England because he was the manager. He had to go to England. So we traveled in Europe and so on. The communists let us go because the Shanghai people were always very nice to us. Of course, we behaved ourselves. We limit our contact with the Chinese friends. Many friends who had relatives in the government or they work for the government, we cut off. Only our friends, Chinese friends, were limited to university professors. Because even when my husband was alive, we realized that we are every day with the foreigners. We don't want to be a bridge between the foreigners and the Chinese. Because under Mao, the Chinese not allowed to have foreign friends. You see, if you have a foreign friend, you have endless trouble. They're watching you day and night. Even as it was, we were working for a foreign company with government permission. Nevertheless, every time I have a dinner party, the very next day, a member of the residence committee would come, usually a retired woman, either school teacher or worker, industrial worker. Shanghai had many factories, I think very simple, to produce towels or cotton cloths, you know. And those women, when they retire, they're usually Communist Party members. And one woman would come without exception. And her excuse was to get some ice, because we had a party, we had 2 refrigerators going. She liked to have some ice. They don't have refrigerator. So we always gave her. And she would sit in the kitchen and talk to my servant. So once I discovered that, I made a point. I was the housewife. When we were going to have a party, so naturally we ordered flowers from the flower shop, and I would arrange the flowers, and the manservant would be standing by with a bucket with water and the flower vase and all that. And I will chat with him. I will say, we're having this dinner party tonight for so-and-so, and Mr. So-and-so is the head of Chartered Bank or Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, or the guests are from the British consulate and the Norwegian consul general. I would tell him, because if I didn't tell him, he might make a mistake. You never know. Some of the foreigners may be targeted. So I dealt with it this way, you know. So he will make a report. And you know, those workers, they're very simple. And besides, for them, it's a job that their leader told them to report. As long as they got something to report, they don't care if it's true or not.
That's right.
I had a powerful radio in my bedroom. And every afternoon, I would listen to BBC and Voice of America. When I come back from the office, about 4:30 or 4:45, I would be, the manservant will bring a tray with tea and some cookies, put it in my study. He will go downstairs. None of my servants would come up unless I ring the bell, because they know that during that time I was listening to BBC or Voice of America.
That was illegal.
As long as they did not see me doing it, they didn't need to report. If they saw me doing it, they have to report. Because if the manservant saw me do it, he didn't report. Then when they asked the maid, the maid might say he was upstairs, so he might know, something like that. But none of them will come up unless I ring the doorbell. Then they will come. So you have a way of living there. You are conscious. For instance, we use shell car. Sometimes the English manager and I share a car to go to office to save gasoline. We register 3 cars, and the gas we get for 3 cars would be enough for 1 car. So we share cars, and we never talk about anything. We just sit. Because if you say anything, comment on whatever, that driver, he is obliged to, maybe periodically, this I never could verify, he may be asked, did you hear anything from the manager and Mrs. Cheng? And you know, I put in my book already that they accuse me of being the superior, although I was assistant to the manager, because he let me get in the car first. let me get into the elevators first. That means I was more important to Shell. I was the spy.
So
you're dealing with people like that, so what can you do?
Yeah. So you were the assistant manager.
I was, they call it advisor.
Advisor. So you worked very closely to the general manager.
You see, what happened was my husband was the general manager. He suddenly had discovered to have cancer.
Where? Liver?
In the colon.
Colon,
And two months later, he died.
How old was he?
47.
Wow.
I was 42.
Wow.
And Shell was caught. They had to find somebody suitable and willing to come to a communist country. And during that interval, they must have somebody to register your CHOP. You know, in China, no signature.
Right.
Your CHOP has to be registered to be responsible person. Otherwise, the government will take it over. And our staff were alarmed. They didn't want to work for the government. They were paid so much higher by Shell. So they kept on saying to me, what are we going to do? Dr. Zheng, is he getting better? Is he getting better? You know, so the manager from Hong Kong came in to see my husband. And he said, afterwards, he had to stay in our house because we couldn't find last 1 moment's notice to find a hotel room for him. All hotels controlled by the government. Anyway, he was given the visa. They realized, the government realized the urgency that he had to come. So he came, and after I took him to the hospital to see my husband, this was 3 days before my husband died. And he came back, he was very shaken. And I gave him a whiskey. And he sat here, I sat here, and he said to me, Nien, because every time I went to Hong Kong, I stayed in their house. He said, Nien, you know, the head office wants you to go there and hold the fort because we have to have somebody. They don't want our office to be taken over. Well, Shell treated me well. And at the same time, the government was wanting me to go to the foreign language school. They want to expand the English department. So I was very happy Shell invited me to, so I didn't want to work for the government. You know, you're under the, it's like working under a searchlight. Everybody's watching you. I can't live like that. I would die of a nervous breakdown, you know? So I was very pleased. Also, working for Shell, we were allowed 3 foreign periodicals. So we subscribed to London Times by airmail, Time magazine all from Hong Kong, and The Economist, 2 magazines, 1 paper. They allowed to come in. And also Shell published many, it's really advertisement, booklets about Shell product. Because our business was all chemical. We were not allowed to sell oil because of the embargo of strategic goods. America was the leader. It's banned. China was a communist country. You mustn't sell anything that is considered strategic goods. Oil, of course.
What kind of
So we sold bitumen, fertilizers, insecticides. Every month we had the permission to import the literature of our product. And this was packed in Hong Kong because they want to see nobody had written Taiwan as China to offend the communists. Republic of China, no, not allowed. So they didn't want to offend the communist government. So the people in Hong Kong sorted out the ones that were suitable to come in. They packed in a box cardboard box about this high for our office to distribute all over China all these research organizations, chemical, and the universities, colleges, and so on. So I often ask them to tuck underneath some Vogue and New Yorker magazine and books I want to read in English, you know. And because I know the communist bureaucracy, that they will look at the top and they can't be bothered to dig to to look under, you know, to see what's in there.
Okay, let's stop right here because I think this change the tape.
Did you listen to what I said?
I did.
Could you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Was it clear?
Is, you know, when I changed the battery,
Yes.
I somehow the thing got pulled out a little bit. So, but it's only in 10 minutes. So
you have to edit it afterwards, because everything people make, they all have to edit.
mm-hmm. Let me ask you again about
Yes.
about it, because we didn't get the sound.
I see.
My mistake. So, so this is you, huh?
Can you imagine? I was 50.
This is you're 50, huh?
Yeah.
And
The next year, I went to prison. The year after that.
you had black hair.
Oh yes, lots of it.
Lots of it.
Came out with very little.
Uh-huh.
And I have false teeth now, because all my teeth were good, but they all had to come out. I had infection in the gum.
Uh-huh.
When I went to the dentist, there were many people waiting. You know, the communists, they don't separate the waiting and the doctor. And she was there, and she examined. She said, "My goodness, 不得了嘞," she said in Chinese. Heaven, you know, how come you seem to be an educated woman? How come you let your teeth get like this before you come to see me? I couldn't say. I was in prison. There were others waiting to see her. She said, "I need to take them all out and deal with your gum."
Did you take it all out?
Each time only one tooth. And during that time, I had to eat liquid food because so painful. Mm-hmm. When I was in there, when they gave us some food to eat, I had to squeeze the blood out, rinse my mouth, wash my mouth, and eat something. Then the blood will come out. Do it again. Anyway, there is plenty of time. You can take ages to eat a little bit of rice and cabbage. You know, I've been toughened by that experience. So I don't mind to live alone, carry things, and go. Many people say, "You're 88. You shouldn't live alone. You should have somebody to do shopping for you and all that." I said, as long as I can do it, I want to do it myself. I think without that imprisonment, I probably couldn't do it. They made me much more self-reliant.
I think you're a tough lady.
No. I have that spirit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my father sent me to Nankai Girls' School when I was 12. I became a boarder. Mm-hmm. I had to rely on myself when I was 12. Mm-hmm. Only allowed to go home for summer and winter holidays. So my father believed in that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You know, when we were real small, he made us walk to school and walk back.
How long was that?
It's about 20 minutes. But when you are only 7 years old, your school book. Many of my school friends at primary school thought I came from a very poor family. Actually, we had a horse carriage, and the rickshaw belonged to the family. He wouldn't let us be pampered and walk to school. My brother and I was 3 years older than my brother next to me. So very often I'm walking there by myself because our time was not all the same. He wanted us anyway. But I had a very independent life. I had to rely on myself a lot. Maybe God was preparing me for my last period of my life. I have to be alone. Mm-hmm. Think of it, I was 42. And I've been alone ever since. And I manage my own investment and from grocery shopping to investment, everything depends on myself.
Let me just double check again. Say something. Say something. I want to go back to that night, August, again.
Yes.
Say it again.
I'll see.
Yeah.
The Red Guards. I should look up my book to make sure the 4 oaths. What were the 4 oaths? I no longer remember. I have my book. Oh yes, let's be more accurate. The Red Guards. Old culture, old habits, old way of thinking. What is the 4th?
Old religion? Old religion?
Old habits,
Superstition?
old, I think old custom, something like that. But I will get it. See if they have index. No.
Maybe I'll remember it, that's okay.
Very simple index. You can get this book,
I have your book.
hardcover,
I have
from Amazon.com for $8. It's secondhand, but very good secondhand.
I have both your hardcover and your softcover too.
You have both?
I need to read it again because it's been some time. My wife was reading it. But then let me ask you again. You know, that night in August was
Yes.
1966, was it? 1966.
66.
So
But they came to me on August the 30th, and I was reading a book that I smuggled in. You know, actually, when are we on the?
Yep.
Oh, mustn't. I was reading one of the books I smuggled.
Do you
in.
remember what it was?
I think it was the rise and fall of the Third Reich.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you're reading that, and they just came in these Red Guards.
Oh yes, they knocked on the door. I was waiting for them.
You were.
Oh yes,
So
because they've been to my next door neighbor, so I know they're coming.
So you knew.
So night after night, it was. I didn't go to bed until midnight. Then I know they're not going to come tonight. Next night, I will sit there and wait because I didn't want them to catch me in bed. And I already told the maid to stay in her room. Don't come out. I don't want them to get insulted or beaten up.
Right.
And the manservant, the cook didn't live in my house. He went home. The manservant was in the kitchen waiting for them too. And then when they banged on the door, he went open. My house was like this. 2 houses were built by the same person. And the inside, you have a little passage. And halfway of the passage, I had a door, wooden, double door. the car could drive in, and there is the garage at the end. And since the car was not parked at my place, that garage I use for storage and coal. You know, in the winter I had to get coal by bringing in American dollars from Hong Kong. Otherwise, you're not allowed to buy coal. You only can buy those coal balls. You cannot heat hot water and have central heating with that. So every year I brought a few $1,000s in to facilitate my life. For instance, one year we need to repair that gate. We couldn't buy wood. We had to go to a special shop, or not a shop, office, to show them I have American dollars. They deduct the cost of the wood. Then I send the carpenter to go there and pick up the wood and repair my garage door.
Crazy.
The ordinary people cannot repair anything.
So,
and they came, they knocked on the door, and I said, and my manservant was out of breath. He ran up the stairs to come to my study, and I was seated on a sofa and reading. He said, they have come. I said, be calm. Open the door, let them in, don't say anything, go back to your room, and don't come out, no matter what happens. I was afraid they will beat me, and they will my servants will come out and get beaten up too. So I put the book on the bookshelf, and I saw a copy of the Chinese Constitution. The communists wrote a very nice constitution. One of the statement was that nobody can enter a private home without a warrant. So I took the Constitution and slowly went downstairs. And I met the Red Guards and their teachers right in the hall downstairs. And a young man, Red Guard, maybe 17, stood like this and said to me, very close to my face, he said, we are the Red Guards. We have come to take revolutionary action against you. Hand over the keys. I had the keys already in my pocket. So I held up the Chinese Constitution. I said, according to the Constitution, you cannot enter a private home without a search warrant. He tore the Constitution out of my hand, threw it on the floor, and said, the Constitution is abolished. Then I laid the key on the, I had a all my furnitures were made specially for me, because when we settled down in Shanghai, I ordered this from a shop. They were all copies of Ming Dynasty furniture. Was a chest. Over the chest was a mirror with the mahogany wood carved on the side. And on this little chest was a Kangxi blue and white vase. I put the key there, and he said the key. And they dispersed, and they pushed me into the dining room. So I sat in the dining room by the table, and I looked at this to say goodbye to all my things. Because you see, these are jade figures, jade jars, and ivory, Japanese dancers, ivory, and all the little things. They were musical instruments and little bowls and snuff bottles and so.
Can you hold it in front of you? I'll get a closer shot of that.
Huh?
Can you hold it up?
I see.
Yeah.
This?
Yeah.
I never show it to anybody.
So those are all the figurines, and very valuable. Okay. And they destroyed them all.
Yes. This came from my friend in England. Now my friend is dying of cancer. I talked to her on the telephone.
And they destroyed everything.
Yeah, these things, I don't know where they've gone to. I think they pocketed them, you know. And they put, I was in the dining room, and the dining room had a window rather like this. The living room had a French window. Mm-hmm. You can walk out to the garden from the living room. Mm-hmm. And my manservant came to the outside, knocked on the window. He knew I was in that room. Mm-hmm. He said, I think I should go to the film studio and tell Mei Ping not to come home. Mm-hmm. I said, good idea. So he, because Mei Ping would come home in the middle of it all.
She might get beat.
Yes, and I didn't want her to get insulted too. So they were there all night. And I went to Mei Ping's room, had to sleep, because they didn't disturb her room. They had their own principles, that Mei Ping was an independent wage earner. She, although her family was bad, she herself was okay at that juncture. And so her room was not disturbed.
And you slept
so
there?
I lay down on her bed and had a good sleep. You know, I'm like that. What is all these things? I have it, I enjoy it. I don't have it, so what? I don't care. You know, it's what the Chinese call 身外之物. It's outside my body, I don't care. Of course, they knock me down and kick me. That's I had to put up with. And I argue with them, you know, when they have interrogation.
Tell us about that.
So the next morning, the Red Guards more or less finished their destruction. And their school brought those hot buns. So they were seated on the staircase and so on, eating the buns. And then they told me to go to the third floor and to select one set of winter clothes, one set of summer clothes to set aside for Mei Ping and me. Only one set of clothes. The rest, they took all. And they also took all my jewelry. And actually, I had a very valuable jade necklace, which came down from my mother's family. And they tore it open, and the jade beads scattered in the garden, in the mud, and so on. They had no idea.
And these were very young teenagers.
Yes, those kids, you know, they never seen anything. When they first came into my house, they didn't dare to walk on the carpet, because I'm sure they never seen any carpet. Mm-hmm. You see, so they were poor,
so they were
working class kids.
15 years old, 16?
I think, yes, they were senior high, probably.
But they were prompted by their teachers to do this, right?
No, the teachers weren't just watching them so they don't kill anybody.
Oh.
You know, because then it become difficult. Mao Zedong always said, we don't want to kill people, because if you cut off the top of, I think, garlic or something, it can grow again. If you cut off somebody's head, it doesn't grow again, in case we want to ask him some questions.
But they did kill a lot of people, though, eventually.
But actually, they torture, and then people die. Mm-hmm. They actually shoot not too many people. Mm-hmm. You know, they love to arrest. Even if you were a senior communist official, you can't escape. Mm-hmm. Mao would put them in this special prison. And you know Liu Shaoqi, the chairman of the People's Republic of China, his wife was locked up longer than I. And she had chains on her feet all the time.
Were you bound all the time?
No. Only when they
interrogating?
During those 11, 12 days.
And you still have the marks, right?
Oh yes, I have scars. And also, this circulation is affected. I always have icy cold hand in the winter.
So this is
Yes.
this is arthritis now.
You see, look at my arthritis. It's very painful. When before I go, only one finger not affected. See, I cut myself because I'm not good at doing housework. See, I cut myself. I'm always in a hurry.
You also mentioned that the prison guards, they would kick prisoners.
You see, I made them angry. They slapped my face, and they slapped this way, this way, and then with the back of their head. Right. Slap. Because I argue with them, you see. Most prisoners are scared to death, but I was never scared of them. During my husband's lifetime, he was going to the office, and I had cook, 2 manservants, 1 maid servant, and 2 gardeners. I had nothing to do, so I bought all these books written by Karl Marx and so on. I studied it, and I loved studying. I read all of it. I could quote Mao's book, and those people who were trying to abuse me, they never read them.
So you quote them back to them?
They only know a few slogans, that they were forced to memorize, usually from Mao's little red book. I read Karl Marx books in both English and Chinese. I had them all. Because I said to myself, I'm now living in a communist country. I want to know what it's all about. But actually, it's not the same. Mao.
It's a big lie.
It was actually Mao Zedong dictatorship. He used whatever that suits him. But I learned 2 things from studying Marxism, which I found most useful for the rest of my life, even now. 2 things. One is never look upon life as static. Everything is constantly changing. If you believe in this, you would never worry. Because when you have a problem, you haven't found a solution, you know that you haven't given it enough time. Eventually, as time goes on, you will learn more and more about that problem. You will find a solution. So you don't need to worry too much. You use your brain, analyze. This is called the theory of constant change. Constantly, the world, the hour you entered my apartment, that's gone. That will never come back again. We already have gone on because it's constantly changing. Another thing I learned from Marx's theory is the economy of any society is the foundation. The social system, the political system are upper structures built on the economic foundation. This is so true. If you don't have a good economy, other things cannot work. This is so true for the person too. It's your economic position in society that determines your position in society. It's so true. These 2 things, if you can use it as basic principles to guide your life, you can succeed. It's people who see everything as static. that they got dropped behind.
Especially now with the internet.
Never mind any period. Now it moves along more quickly. You have to be with it.
I want to go back to
That night.
not that night, but the 6.5 years. You said that
Yes.
there were some very, very brutal people, prison guards.
Well,
but there were
only one nice person. You know, and also the girl from the kitchen, because when they tied my arms behind me, I couldn't eat very well. I had to, you know, there is a little opening on the door with a cover that they can operate from outside. I cannot open it or close. They open that and hand you a container, oval container, with rice and cabbage on top. They hand it to you. And you take it and sit down on the bed and eat. Then you hand it back to them, you know, when they collect the container. This girl worked in the kitchen, delivered the food on a cart. Each cell she delivers. After my hands were tied behind me, and in the end I fainted and fell on the ground. That night, she hid 2 hard-boiled eggs under my rice. And she did not want to collect the empty container because she was afraid that I might say thank you and expose her. So when she came to outside my door, she yelled in a loud voice. She said, "You're always so slow. When you finish, give the container to the guard on duty." She did not open the little window in case I said thank you. She buried 2 hard-boiled eggs for me to eat. Now that's out of the kindness of her heart, and there was no way I could pay her back.
And if she was discovered, she would have been
Oh yes, severely punished, because we were enemies, the prisoners considered to be enemies of the government. Whether you are guilty or not is another question. To the guards and the people who work there, we are guilty.
Because you were
otherwise
there.
You wouldn't be
there.
incarcerated.
That's right. What were they trying to do? They were trying to torture you?
Well, they tried to make me say that I was a spy. And Shell office in Shanghai was a spy organization, because during the interrogation, I analyzed, and this was aimed at Zhou Enlai. Because if Zhou Enlai personally signed a document to allow Shell to operate in China. You see, I tell you this case. In early 1950, there was a Chinese oil national, that's government oil company, lighter, small ship in Hong Kong harbor. The officers on this little ship wanted to go to Taiwan, take the ship to Taiwan. The crew wanted to return to the mainland. So they had a fight. As a result of their fight, the Hong Kong government didn't know what to do with this ship. So they took it over. Because the Hong Kong government took over a ship that the communists claimed to belong to them, so they ordered Shell's property to be requisitioned. Requisition is not take over. That means they use for the time being. Actually, they saved Shell because we weren't allowed to import oil. Oh, we had a lot of oil, which we sold to the government. So we got big lot of money in the Communist Bank, you know. And they requisitioned our property. So our refinery, all these service stations all over China, they took over. If we had to pay the land tax and not allowed to sack any of the staff, we couldn't last more than a year, even with the money they paid us for the oil. They requisitioned. So all these people the government took over, we didn't have to pay them anything. So we were able, and then we were allowed to rent out the different floors of the huge building. We only had one floor for our office because we no longer have business like old days. Many people left, the foreigners all left. We just had an office for our doctor and one floor for our staff. We were reduced to something like 56 people from something like 10,000 with all the service stations all over China, from Sichuan and Manchuria, all over. They took over. Requisition to punish Shell.
What year was this?
This was 1950. They took over 49, you know. And my husband just entered Shell because he promised to help them 1 year. And then when the year ended, the universities were taken over too. And he wasn't a professor. He was a temporary, part-time professor. So he no longer belonged to those universities, thank God, because it's no life if you have to have a supervisor who didn't understand anything you were teaching to tell you how to teach. And so he went to work for Shell with the government encouragement, you could even say. And we were allowed to rent out the other floors to the government office. They paid us rent. So even if we did no business, we could go on for a long time.
How long did Shell last?
Last until the year of the Cultural Revolution.
66.
Yes, with our business and the money we had in the bank, and we were paid interest on the money.
But you never saw
But
any
it was Zhou Enlai who signed the document to allow Shell to keep her head office and also the garages in another part of Shanghai and the driver's dormitory over the garages. So we had 4 cars and 8 or 9 drivers, because some of them worked at night or weekends and so on. And this whole building we rent out.
So you think that...
And those Chinese communist office, they love to be in Shell building because we had central heating.
And you think that part of the reason why they wanted you to confess was
to use my confession to attack Zhou Enlai. The least they can accuse him of was make a mistake. They can even go further and say he facilitated spying by foreign
because
company.
You would be a convicted spy.
I sensed that that made me even more firm to resist them, because there was always a man to copy everything down, what I said, written down, what I was asked, what I said. And there was a record, you know. And they didn't make me say what they wanted, but Nixon came, so we were all released. And when I was
released... Was it after or before Nixon came, when you were released?
Oh, after.
Afterwards.
They released, you know, I did not know, because I was in the women's prison. It was a small building. Every British bank and the #1 Chinese of all the foreign companies in Shanghai were locked up in the men's building. They all knew each other were there because they could hear them. And the few I saw after I came out, none of them confessed, because they all saw through. This was not because of us they put us in prison. they wanted to use us to accuse the more mild faction of the Communist Party leaders. Mao wanted to get rid of them. You see, Deng Xiaoping, Zhou Enlai, and a whole bunch of them. Liu Shaoqi died because they realized Mao's policy wasn't working, and the people were starving, and they can't go on like that. And so they were Communist Party leaders. They still believed in communism, but they wanted to go by this way, what they are doing now. So Mao did not win. After he died, they win. But in the meantime, they killed a number of them. And the other people, like myself, not related, I mean, those leaders don't even know that I exist, had to be sacrificed. Because they arrested all the most senior Chinese in every foreign company, including Norwegian, Swedish. And they forced us to confess, because it was Zhou Enlai's policy to have the Western companies in China. He didn't want to cut them off altogether.
Now tell me, 6.5 years, that's a long time.
Yes, a long time, but I must have been very healthy. So I was the first child of my mother. My mother was 21 when I was born. You know, now it's fashionable for women to have children after they're 40, 35. That's leaving it too late.
What kept you going? You mentioned a little bit.
Well, I
religion.
believe in God. I prayed. I prayed real hard. I believed God is just. God often does something we don't understand. We must trust that in the end, everything will be all right. So I was optimist. I thought I would walk out that prison.
You did?
Yeah, well, very nearly didn't, because my health broke down. Yeah. And I even, my arthritis, my heart, I came out with heart palpitation and rapid heartbeat and irregular heartbeat. Now it's much worse, much worse. And I won't take medicine now because I'm 88. 2 years now I haven't taken any medicine because those medicine makes me forgetful. They dull my mind. I rather live and control my own life shorter than to live with my mind damaged and depend on other people longer. What is the point of living longer? I lived a long life already. I'm satisfied, more than satisfied. I didn't expect to live more than 80, and now I'm 88.
2 more years, you're 90.
Even if I have cancer now, I won't die right away. I will be very nearly 90.
You don't have cancer, do you?
I don't know. You never know.
Well, you look very...
But there is a punishment for people who live long, because you lose your family members, people you love, and your friends. The last few years, every year, I lost 4 or 5 friends. And my book helped me make lots of friends. I have lots of friends. And I've lived here 20 years now. I have many good neighbors. We help each other. On Monday, I have to go to see a doctor. A neighbor will drive me. And when my neighbors get sick, I drive them.
You still drive?
Oh, I still drive. Oh, I'm going to have my license renewed in July.
Oh, good.
So I'm doubly careful because if I even have a scraped fender, they will not give it to me.
Oh, is that right?
They will use that as an excuse.
To deny it, yeah.
I don't have anything. Clean record. Today I drove, I went to get water, I went to grocery store, I went to drugstore. When I was out, I came back at 2:30 and had a little something to eat for lunch.
Let me ask you
Any
one
more
question.
questions? I think we covered everything.
Almost. And about your daughter, you know.
Yes.
What happened?
You see, they told me that she committed suicide because during that time, many people did commit suicide by jumping out of the window. But after Mao died, 75, 76, he died. After Mao died, people start to talk. And one of her high school friends became a doctor. And she was on duty at the hospital for emergency that night. No, not at daybreak. Mei Ping's corpse was sent to that hospital early in the morning by people passing by on Nanking Road. And she said Mei Ping had wounds. If she jumped out of a window, her body should not have wounds. She was beaten. And the man now is out of prison. 20 years he served. The leader of the gang.
That beat her?
Yes. He was a worker of a textile factory. And he wanted to do something to please the government. I mean Mao's faction. And not him alone, there was a group. And 6 people they beat to death. Mei Ping was one. They were all from so-called the wrong kind of family background. And they had an open trial after I left China. They gave me my visa very quickly. They wanted to get me out of there because during the open trial, the members of the family could express an opinion. They were all asked if the sentence satisfied them. They knew I would not be satisfied because they gave the man death penalty, but what do you call it? Not executed right away.
Life imprisonment?
No, they sentenced him to death penalty, the leader, but delayed, what is it, to observe his behavior.
Probation?
Then they gave him 20 years. They reduced the sentence.
Was your daughter in a prison when this happened? Or where
No,
was
she was never put in prison. This happened in an office. It's Athletic Association office from the 9th floor. They threw her body down to fake suicide.
And this man...
he was the leader, but he was not necessarily the person who caused her to die. That's their excuse. And he behaved well under incarceration, so they released him after 20 years.
Was he
He was just an ordinary worker, but he belonged to the Jiangqing. He supported Mao's wife.
the Gang of 4?
Yes.
And
He belonged to their group.
what year was this?
My daughter died 1 year after I was in prison. I was imprisoned in September 1966. She died in June 1967.
So was it still the Red Guards or what?
No, not the Red Guards. Red Guards, they just use them to destroy your home. That's
So
all.
what did this man belong to? I mean,
He was a worker, ordinary worker, and they form every factory, every office. The activists formed a nucleus to support the Cultural Revolution. They call themselves the proletariat revolutionaries, 无产阶级革命派. Yet the ordinary workers, they don't need to join. They carry on with their work.
why do you think they...
Because they hope to become official, you see. Mao, after every political movement, he promote some activists to be officials. So in order to get ahead with their career, these people were ambitious.
Why do you think were they interrogating your daughter? What were they doing?
No, that I would never know. Nobody will ever know because they certainly wouldn't talk. They wanted her to say I was a spy. She knew because I refused to say I was a spy. This started before they got hold of her. When she was still at the film studio, they put her under house arrest in the film studio.
How old was she when she died?
She was 25. She was born 1942, 25.
Beautiful woman too, your daughter.
I think we should stop now.
Okay.
Yes, that's enough.
Okay.